Hi and good evening, everybody. My name is Matthew Reed and welcome to How to Repair Pendulum Clocks live stream. Always a little bit of a mystery as to whether this is working or not. I can't see the YouTube screen tonight. A complicated story, but anyway, presumably it is working. I'll try and check. Anyway, let me just... Oh, it is working because I can hear myself somewhere, so brilliant. Presumably it is because I can hear myself somewhere. Anyway, very warm welcome to our live stream, and this is our clock that we're working on for the next couple of weeks. As you can see, it's an American clock, and it was donated by one of my clients who said that I could put it to good use, and I said yes, I certainly can, because we'll run a live stream on it. So I'm a little bit out of my depth with American clocks, don't have a massive amount of experience with them, so I'll need all the help I can get as we go along. And last week what we did is like our first live stream, a long case clock, we kind of approach the project, and I think that's very healthy, very useful to kind of, just assess the overall wider environment that the object is in, and to think about where we want to go with the project, because you might think, well, we want to repair the clock, that's what clocks are for, but that's not always the case, or at least there are different approaches to whatever end point we want. Now, in this case, really delighted to see that last week that actually the clock is in good condition. It was quite dusty. It had been stored in somebody's garage for 38 years or something. I can't remember, but a long time, a bit like the long case clock, really. So we, as you can see, we took the bezel and the dial off. We took the mechanism, the movement out of the case, and we did some vacuuming, which is kind of really important. Vacuuming is useful with these historic objects because it kind of lifts the surface dust and dirt away. And so we've done that inside and out, and the thing is looking kind of a lot cleaner. However, and if you can see here along the, if we zoom in, we might lose it, along the horizontal surfaces of the object, there's been some liquid or damp or something on there that's caused that surface dust to actually become kind of glued or cemented to the surface. I'm not sure what we're going to be able to do about that. I don't want to get into any kind of refinishing, but what we're going to try and do today is to do a bit of cleaning of the painted surface. Okay, let's just see if we can get that to focus. Yay. So we're going to do some cleaning, just kind of very light touch stuff, because frankly, I'm really happy with the clock as it is. And if that's how it needs to stay, then so be it. In the meantime, during the week, it's been a busy old horological week, by the way. Today, this morning, we reached our 1,000th member on Facebook, on our Facebook group. If you're new to this live stream, this is kind of part of a suite of things that we do. You can probably hear outside, we're in the middle of a rainstorm, so excuse the noise. In fact, if the whole thing goes off, it's because we've been struck by lightning, not before time. Anyway, this is a kind of whole suite of things that started with our book that you can see up here, which is about getting beginners started. Then we've got a Facebook group, we've got some videos, we've got another live event on a Saturday night called Open Clock Club, which runs until early November. And then we've got this kind of slightly random event, which is going to become a kind of a pop-up event, I think, as and when objects present themselves. And also in the post or unlocking period, horology is getting kind of busy, so which is a good thing, but also it means that our energies are spread about a bit more. Anyway, well done for getting to 1,000 members. And in the week, I showed some pictures of this clock because it's kind of really, I was quite surprised, frankly, how nicely made it is. The case is glued and screwed construction, so it's kind of quite high quality. But this piece of timber here on the front is just one piece of timber, which is screwed here and here. And of course, as it shrunk over the years with the grain, it's split along the grain. You can see it's split here, and it's split in two places up here. So what had happened, I'll just zoom in, you can see the sort of repair a little bit that I've done there. What had happened was this piece of timber was actually completely loose, and you could pull it out with your hands. There was that much gap. So I used, I put this on Facebook, but I'll repeat it just in case any of you are new, completely new. I used this adhesive. There are other, this is by Titebond, and this is the hide glue, not the white glue, not the stuff that's stronger than a spaceship or whatever it is. You don't want that on historic objects. And the reason you don't want that on historic objects, particularly like this anyway, is that the things are kind of not doing anything. They just kind of sit there. And yeah, tall case clocks have got a bit of weight on the seat board and so on. But if occasionally they fall apart, that's fine. Because if you use white glue, you know, like PVA or something, then if you ever want to undo your repairs, reversibility, or the kind of concept of reversibility is sort of a foundation stone of conservative practice. You can't undo that. It's as it says on the packet, the glue is stronger than the wood. So in the old days, when these clocks were made and all the 18th century stuff that we mess about with, they would have used animal glues, either fish glue or rabbit skin glue, and you would have had a glue pot, so a hot glue, the kind of thing that you use to make musical instruments. And these are really useful glues for us in repairing clocks. So that's what I use. Titebond. This live stream isn't currently sponsored, so if there's anybody who works for Titebond, then we're open to a sponsorship deal. Okay. Anyway, really good. Get yourself some of that. The old glue pot is great if you're a furniture conservator or restorer, but I don't do enough kind of wood type work to warrant that, so I just keep this stuff in the drawer. It's really good. Okay, so enough of that. I've clamped. I'm just going to take these clamps off. I've banged on about these clamps before. They're a brand called Clemsia, and they're made in Germany. And they're really cool. They come in different lengths because they're not massively heavy. So if you've got a relatively fragile structure, a bit like a long case clock hood, then these are good. And also, it's dead easy to adjust the tension. And they've got these cork-lined jaws. So they tend to be kind of non-marking. So anyway, I've talked about those before. Again, we're open to a sponsorship deal. Axminster Tools, where I got these from. Thank you. And the glue, in fact, from Axminster Tools. So there we are. There's our clamps. Taking those off. Now, of course, this joint will probably split again, but I don't mind. You know, it's sort of joined together for the time being. I didn't want the piece of wood to drop out and get lost. And that is about the extent of what I'm interested in doing. But to that end, what I did, if we just flip it over, you can see now that it's vacuumed inside. So still looks dusty, but it's actually relatively clean. Is here in the top. Again, if we could just get the old camera to focus. Is it going to behave? Maybe not. It doesn't like looking inside there. Come on. There we are. Inside the top there, what I did was I glued a bit of cotton tape with, again, the sort of animal glue, the hide glue. You could use something like, I forgot to call it now, buckram, is it? The kind of stuff that you'd use on a piece of furniture for upholstery. Any kind of textile, linen, cloth can, you know, the stuff you'd use for making books would go in there as well. And it just gives it a bit more stability, but without drilling new holes or using screws or anything like that. So happy there. We've got these holes to plug up, and in fact, we might do that now. I think there was a bit of interest from Team How to Repair Pendulum Clocks about plugging those holes up live on air. So let's do that very exciting thing right now. I'll just get a transit blanket. All right, team up. Okay. Oh, good. Oh, good. Are we broadcasting? I guess we are otherwise. Right. Okay, excellent. Right, so I'm just going to tip the clock up a little bit. Hopefully it won't fall on the floor so you can see better. There we go. Let's just go on to manual focus because otherwise it's going to be messing about. There we are. So what's happened here by the look of it is the mechanism, the movement. Here it is. Oh, something's just fallen on my keyboard, which is annoying. There we go. The mechanism here, the movement, is retained by 4 straps, and those straps move, or they're movable anyway. And the thing that fell on my keyboard made it all the screen go dark. Anyway, technology woes. And I think the screw holes have become worn and the thread stripped in the wood. And of course, most people learn this when they're young, that you stick a matchstick in the hole and then you can put the screw back in. The problem with match wood, or the wood that they make matchsticks out of, is it's very soft. So it doesn't actually hold the threads that well. So the person that's refitted the mechanism in the case, they've moved the straps across a little bit and put the screw in a new hole. I'm actually going to move it back. And the reason I'm going to move it back is, of course, it's not actually moving it back, but it's moving it to a conjectured prior arrangement, is that the winding arbors are not aligned with the dial. So I want to give them the best opportunity of being lined up, and I presume they were when they were new. So this hole here and this hole, yeah. So those 2 holes are the earlier ones, and I'm just going to plug them up. So just get some. I don't know what this will do. It's a skewer. It's not pegwood, it's beechwood actually. It's an old sort of meat skewer thing. Yeah, that will go in there. Let's just fire it. So maybe that's actually a little bit small. Let's look for something bigger. Something a bit larger diameter. Here's some slightly chunkier pegwood, which is pretty tough. Yeah, that might do it. That's better. Just get that to be a decent fit in there. Yeah, so it's been a busy old, as always, it always seems to be busy, but it seems to be getting busier at the moment in terms of our horological projects that are on the go. So keep an eye out on Facebook for those. Where I can, I'll share them, or on Twitter, or even here or Open Talk Club, wherever. I will do what I can. Sometimes the clients I work with are cool with that. Other times they obviously want more privacy, so I can't do that. But anyway, some interesting projects coming up. So it's going to be a busy old winter. Okay, so what I'll do there is just glue that piece of wood in the hole. Then I can either just break it off, which leaves the wood a bit rough, but it does the job of plugging the hole. Or I can use a really sharp chisel and just chisel the thing away there. So let's just shorten that. Yeah, it's getting to be a pretty good fit. Interesting point actually about doing wood repairs, restorations, conservation, whatever you want to call it, is that I will happily tackle things like this, and that is about my limit. I know some people have a shop where they do both. They do the mechanism and the case, if you like, and they also do things like gilding, and they do watches, and they do all sorts, which massive amount of respect to those people. I don't do that. I kind of will glue a bit of veneer down, maybe clamp, just like you've seen here. And then if it gets beyond that, what I do with my clients is I say, this is beyond my ability, but I do, I can't recommend anybody, but there are some conservators nearby who you might like to try. Or, of course, the beauty of working in an institution is there'll be somebody just down the corridor who's the wood person, and you can ask them all those kind of questions. And then some good tips as well. I was thinking, I think we're in correspondence or something on Facebook with somebody who studied at Westdean College, which is where I was trained 20 odd years ago now. And the beauty of a place like that, and I'm sure there are colleges in the States as well that are similar, is you've got a whole lot of different disciplines from books conservation, paper, metalwork, furniture, clocks, blacksmithing, and they're all within the same environment. So you can learn a lot from that cross-disciplinary action, and you can also ask a lot of questions and make a lot of contacts too. So when you're in the situation that I'm in, where I get something that I'm not particularly happy with, then you've got somebody to ask. Okay, so that is done. I'm just going to get my chisel. And if I can just, that hole in the bottom of the case is really useful for putting the chisel. So I'm just going to mark it like that. Now I'm going to, if I can see the mark I've made. Oh yeah, there. Get my piercing saw and saw through as much as I can without sawing that off. So saw through 9/10 of the way. Once we plugged up this couple of holes, very easy to saw the whole thing off. Once we've plugged up these couple of holes, we'll get on with the cleaning. And then if we've got any time left, we will look at what we're going to do with the movement and those springs. There's been some cool correspondence on the Facebook group. Too much glue. Cool correspondence on the Facebook group. There's our glue on there. Probably try and put a bit in the hole. There we go. The good thing again about this glue is if you get a bit of overspill, just wipes up with a warm cloth, even when it's all kind of cured or dried or whatever it does, dried, I suppose. So you don't have to worry about cleaning up straight away. Yeah, there's been some. There we go. Okay, so there's about 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter left there sticking out, which I'll just get really sharp chisel and clean that up later. We'll just do the other one quickly. Hole's a bit smaller. So yeah, there's been some nice correspondence about mainsprings on these American clocks and how you hold them when you're taking them out. We've had a lot of interest in, not exactly conflicting, but a range of opinions as what is the best way to do it. I think last week we, Derek, and if Derek's there, is he today?
I haven't seen him yet.
No, Derek, right, okay. Well, anyway, Derek suggested to use a flat metal kind of band type clips. I've got some round section ones somewhere, and then Jonas very, very kindly showed us how to use zip ties, and I've got another idea as well. So all sorts of different methods of doing that.
A couple of questions from Mark. For the wood, sometimes use cocktail sticks. Is that okay?
Yes, okay, yeah. I mean, it needs to be reasonably, it's just a small hole, obviously, but a hard wood, not matchsticks. As I say, when you trying to kind of do things quickly, matchsticks are always available. But yeah, plenty glue in the hole, and obviously what we're trying to do is just to minimize the kind of damage or the change to the surrounding material. I mean, again, these kind of small running repairs are pretty straightforward, but what I would say is, just build up your contacts. Again, that's the good thing about Facebook. I don't go on any of the Facebook groups because my commitment to our group is like takes up a lot of time, which is really, really great. But I'm sure there are similar groups for conservation of easel paintings and furniture and leather and you name it. So obviously good to go in those groups and to build up your sort of professional contacts, which again is why I like Icon as a professional group membership, and not necessarily for me anyway the clocks people, because Icon has got a really kind of wide scope. That's Institute Conservation.
Germany.
Yeah.
Sometimes uses a lid putty.
Yeah.
To fill one of your screw holes. Is that terrible?
Yes, it's not terrible, but the milliput is this stuff here, and it's available. It's like a modeling clay, but it's not clay. That's the sort of problem with it. It's a good thing with it is it's epoxy. So it comes in two parts, you mix them together. So if you've ever used anything like West System or Araldite, you mix those two parts and then there's a chemical reaction. And the problem with epoxies is that within reason, they're not undoable. So when you use a product like this, and you see I've got some, so I do use it, and it can be incredibly useful for building up edges where you need strength. But you have to kind of balance that with the fact that it's kind of quite difficult to undo it as well. So, yeah, I mean, you need as many things as you can in your armory is the answer. You want to have a whole range of things. So, because the problems are always slightly different. This, of course, doesn't have much load on it. These screws are quite chunky. It doesn't need that kind of strength. Yeah, I mean, just think about the three, for me anyway, different, things for different people. The three kind of concepts that I would use when decision making is the thing, of course, are a kind of minimal intervention approach. So at the beginning of a project, you kind of think where you want to be, you talk to stakeholders, clients, that kind of thing, and you agree a position that you're happy with. Now, there's a big difference between agreeing at the beginning of the project and what actually happens in the project, because of course things crop up that you hadn't foreseen, and you have to change tack a little bit, negotiate a new route. So, but once you've agreed that position, and who cares what it is, it's agreed, it's written down, the contract is signed, and you head towards that thing. What I would say is you only do what's necessary to get to that point. You don't go over and beyond that. The second principle is reversibility or maximum retreatability, and that's where you might come unstuck, pardon the pun, with your epoxy resin. Is it possible to undo it reasonably? And it may be that it's not, and as long as you're cool with that, that's fine. And then the third thing is accountability. You've got to say, I used this particular thing on this particular day for these very good reasons. When you come to structures in wood, and I don't know masses about them, but learn a bit at college, is there's a big issue with fixings and glues that are stronger than a structure that might actually need to or want to move. And if you fix a thing with a very strong thing, it might actually cause the problem to be worse in the first place, and it'll damage more old material because joints can't move, and wood expands and contracts and things. So yeah, your accountability. I did this on this day for these reasons. Tomorrow is another day, and you might change your mind, but there we are. So that's my kind of thinking about nothing wrong with the epoxy, but might you ever want to undo, or somebody else undo, that repair? Of course, you don't know, but the good thing about the animal glue is you can just warm it up a bit with a bit of warm water and it drops apart. Right, okay, let's get the piercing saw out again. I mean, it'd be interesting, as I said, to find or talk to somebody who is a furniture conservator and see what their approach would be. Oh, gosh, glue on the floor now. And but I again remember at college, we the furniture department had a lot of fish glue, again similar to this, not hide glue but fish glue in a bottle that was kind of always on the go, so I presume that's the thing to use. I was yesterday in there we go, so that's good. Let's just give that a little tap down. Don't do that there. They need a bit of trimming, but that's done. I've faffed about enough with the repairs. I was peeling some garlic yesterday and reminded of, it wasn't one of my students, but a master's project that was doing some research on boule work. Now, you'll be familiar with them. If you weren't here last week, the back of this clock is completely missing, so I need to deal with that, but that's another issue. I did wonder about taking the mounts off, and there's some eagle-eyed person last week pointed out the mounts are white metal, so some kind of zinc-based white metal probably. I'm actually going to leave them in place and work around them. Could take them off, but I don't really want to disturb the screws. But I did notice that, in fact, the screws, again, they're, I think they're sound, but you can see here, look, they're a little bit loose. So let's just deal with that. And the garlic, anyway, the boule work, which is marquetry in metal and wood, Charles Andre Boule. And it drops apart. It's on a pine substrate, typically, I think, maybe also on a hardwood substrate sometimes, I don't know. It just drops apart the whole time, which is part of its beauty in a way. And apparently a lot of it was glued with garlic, or get some garlic-based glue. When you peel a clove of garlic, it's really sticky. So I thought it was quite a cool bit of research. Anyway, so all sorts of things to investigate there. So let's just tighten up. Right, so that's really nice because these screws, you can see here, look, it's nice and tight now. They don't need resetting. So again, you know, conservation is a cost benefit exercise. And when I say cost, I mean like in the widest sense of cost. When I say benefit, I mean in the widest sense of benefit that I can conceptualize anyway. So there's obviously a problem with taking things apart. You see it with French clocks and again, boule work. It never kind of goes back together right or flat or anything. So I think I'm going to leave these mounts in place and see how it goes to clean around them. Should really be using my transit blanket, but it's a bit of a just finish tightening those. Okay, one thing I am going to check is that the case doesn't rock on, yeah, which it does. So on our Open Clock Club on the Facebook group, anyway, we've got like top 20 or 30 or whatever it is, reasons why clocks stop. And we're going to work through these over the next couple of weeks. One of them is that the case is not secured to the wall, like in a long case clock or a tall case clock, but it also applies very much to mantle clocks. If the case can rock like this, if it happens to be kind of at the point where the pendulum is making the case rock, the clock can easily stop. So clocks have typically got 4 feet, which is bad news in the sense of it's really difficult to get them to not rock. But just be very mindful of that you, when you deliver and set up a clock like this, it must be free from being able to rock or move around, which is why clocks on sort of little wobbly side tables typically don't work that well unless they're balance clock, you know, carriage clocks or something. Anyway, right. So we've done our gluing, we've plugged those holes, feeling happy with that. The next thing is we're going to clean or wash this to try and get some of this kind of mottling off. I'm not massively bothered about it, but it'll be just interesting to see what so-called quote unquote improvement we can make. Right, so I'm going to do that with water. Basically, I'm just going to wash the whole thing with water. So let's get our benzene jar, like a watch jar. I've only just bought this, actually. I bought this for a video I made about overhauling a pocket watch or a watch, and it's been incredibly useful. So watch makers benzene jar, really useful thing. And what I'm going to use to wash the case, or at least do a little experiment anyway and see how it goes. We're on this experimental journey together, is deionized water, regular deionized water that you, I think they use this for finishing cleaning cars, or what people nowadays, I was just reading why, for detailing, they call it detailing, and they all, when we were lads, and lasses, we used to call it cleaning, now you can't call it that, it's called detailing. Anyway, they use that to finish because it doesn't have the lime in it or the minerals, so you don't get those kind of white smudgy marks. So deionized water, I'm going to add in with that a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. That just helps the water to evaporate, and again, it's obviously a solvent in its own right. And then a tiny little bit of Vulpex soap, which is a conservation grade liquid soap, as you can see here. And Team Open Clock Club will put it on there. Chat, maybe? Yeah. So just a tiny bit of this to act as a detergent and kind of wetting agent. So I'll try and do this without spilling a whole lot everywhere. So just get some deionized water and a little bit of isopropyl in there. Probably, I mean, you could measure this out in a beaker, in a graduated beaker. Probably going to put about 2-3% isopropyl in, it's a guess, and a tiny wee drop of Vulpex soap just to help things along. And we'll experiment with this. We could change those proportions. Again, I think anything that you would use for cleaning paper, maybe in conservation or wax surfaces or so on, would be good for this. But we're just trying to, I think where those droplets have been on the case and it's kind of cemented the dust, I'm hoping, and we'll see, that we can begin to liberate some of that and maybe just lift it. As I said before, I'm not bothered about it being sort of changed. I'm quite happy with it as it is, but it'd be nice just to kind of lift a little bit. Okay, so
it's Vulpex is the brand name.
Vulpex, yeah. What? Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So going to use just a natural bristle brush. You've seen this brush a lot. It looks a bit grubby. I'm embarrassed to say it probably is a bit grubby because I used it last week for dusting out the case and I haven't washed it since then, but there you go. We'll have to live with that because, let's say, busy old time. So what you would do normally, of course, is to begin on a bit that isn't particularly visible. I'll zoom out as much as I can without revealing all the horror that's around in terms of mess. And focus, please. Thank you. But on the back, where it's less visible, there actually isn't much of this sort of mottling. So because we're on our learning journey, I'm just going to dive in here. Then obviously you wouldn't do this normally. You would do some experiments in an unseen place on the object because it might go horribly wrong. I don't think so. Just put some gloves on.
Jeremy says, can you use that mixture that you've just
mixed
up, that potion?
Yeah.
Like into clock type?
Yes, you can. But again, Jeremy, that's what I've used on, I've had 2 or 3 of those early 19th century painted dials on our own live stream pub clock. Going to use that. Yeah, it's really good because obviously what you don't do is kind of slosh it on. You apply it pretty dry. but it just enables you to kind of try a bit, maybe add a little bit more isopropyl if you want to lift it a bit quicker. But rather than going in there with something like acetone or methylated spirits or something, you know, this is just pretty sort of just lifting. In fact, on the live stream, no, not the live stream, the Fusey dial clock we did, I cleaned that down with exactly this with this solution, and I was really happy with it. It just got a bit of the surface dirt off, but anyway, let's see how we go on here. So I'm just going to apply it a bit with a. I've got some. Oh, here we are. White cotton cloth here, which I'm just going to dry out the brush. I'm going to apply it with two things. Firstly, with this brush and see how it goes. And I'm going to do the classic kind of clean this half and leave that half for the time being at least, and we can see what the difference is, if any. And then I'm also going to use something called a smoke sponge, which is a paper conservator type natural sponge. I think we did use it on the dial. It was really, really good. So let's just have a little experiment here. So I'm just mixing up that soap. Now this is going to get the paper all wet because I haven't, as always, haven't thought it through. So I'll just dry off some of that excess moisture from the brush and just really gently going to start trying to liberate some of this dust. And I can see straight away, actually, it's moved some of that material. I don't know if you can see it in the reflected light, but it was some white sort of powdery stuff. Now, I don't want to go bonkers here because you don't want the water to actually penetrate the pen. So I'll keep drying my brush. And I've also got in my little armory of cleaning materials. And the other thing, when I was vacuuming last week, I was being a bit enthusiastic. What you don't want to do is to actually push the dirt into the surface. You want to lift the dirt out. So somewhere here, we've got some sticks like cotton buds from Preservation Equipment Limited. These are called swabs. Thank you. Cotton swabs. So I can use those in the corners to lift some of this stuff out. And yet, if you can see there, but straight away, it's the probably when it's compressed on YouTube, you won't be able to see it. But there's actually a lot of dirt there straight away that's been lifted away. And also, I've got just regular kind of cotton wool. Now, I don't know. It says on the packet it's 100% pure cotton wool, but I kind of don't believe it, that it hasn't got anything else in it at all. So I'm going to use the cotton wool to kind of soak up some of this excess water. Yeah, and I can see straight away, even with that bit of liquid on there, again, you probably can't see the color because the camera is a little bit overexposed, but there's quite a lot of dirt there. So that's my MO as for the next 10 minutes. So it's a good time to go make a cup of tea, have a little comfort break. Now I want to just stop that. So there are all sorts of materials that you might not want to use on a surface like this, and that's anything that's not acid free. You want it to be pH neutral, essentially. So things like you get this roll of paper from the car accessory shop, which is great for mopping up oil spills and things, but don't put it near your historic objects because you don't know what's in it, basically. That's often the problem. And that's the problem with things like, I know I advocate cleaning the mechanism in paraffin and white spirits because it's kind of relatively inexpensive and accessible. But the problem, again, I would say, is you don't actually know what's in that sort of mix of stuff. Now, this is dried, and you can see, even with that really kind of quick application, I'm not going to do masses of this, obviously. It's not exactly the most exciting thing in the world, although maybe it is. No, it's not. Official. It's official. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. So again, I don't want to push this dirt sort of into the surface. So keeping the brush reasonably dry. And again, I'll put some of this again, like last week on Facebook, and you can see the amount of dirt that we're lifting out of this. Now, you might think this is some enormous faff, but actually, it doesn't take that long. You know, maybe it's going to take a couple of hours to go over the whole thing if we were to sit it out. And the beauty of doing it this way is you can go over it what I would call relatively lightly. A conservator, paintings conservator, would probably think that this was like going in with the big guns. But you can go over it reasonably lightly, and then you can go back and do some more. And that's really important in terms of approach. I don't want it to get too wet, otherwise the whole thing's going to get a bit soggy, and we don't want that. The problem with the cotton wool is it leaves fibers behind, whereas these swabs tend not to. But what I can do after is just to go back with a dry brush and do some more gentle vacuuming to lift away some of those loose fibers. I'm not particularly bothered. You obviously don't want those fibers inside the movement. Now, what I'm excited about doing here is not necessarily this black surface, but the painted marbled surface, because I'm really excited about this clock and very concerned that that marbled surface is like really fragile. And I don't know how people normally approach these. I've seen a lot of these clocks kind of completely scrubbed and refinished, which is not my bag, as you know. I'm not interested in that, but you know, each to their own. I think on Facebook, was it? Have I got this right? Jeremy put some pictures of a really nice kind of tavern type clock. And again, that whole thing is incredibly sort of in good condition, you know, in one sense, and fragile, quite vulnerable. So I'm thinking here, this paint underneath, I'll show you when I flip the thing over. Now I'm not concentrating, of course I'm talking rather than actually thinking about what I'm doing. But this paint, when it was new, was gloss. Around where the bezel is, it's glossy, should I say. So you can see there, it's really lifting this stuff up, which I presume is nicotine. It's basically 100 years, 120 years of dirt. So what you would do is this approach, go over the whole thing once, reflect on it, take some photographs, compare, see where you've been, maybe go back, do some more. And then there comes a point where you say, that's enough, I've either spent enough time on it, or in fact, the thing is as clean as we want. Now, it's quite warm in here today, so I'm not bothered about sort of artificially drying this thing. But obviously, if it was cold, you might want to very gently just dry some of this water off again, just to stop it from penetrating the surface too much. Now, I might go over this again, but I want to see what it looks like when it's dried, because that's going to give me a much better indication of where we're at in terms of change. But I think we can see already that those splodges of dust that presumably water, it got rained on or something, or maybe just condensation from going up. This was in a garage, so it would have probably gone over the dew point, frozen, that kind of thing, and the dust has gotten stuck to it. So yeah, quite happy with that. But let's look at it once it's dried out. We might have to go back. So let's just flip it around. So zoom in a bit here. We'll do a bit that you can see, which is, so let's work on this bit here, get the camera to focus. Yeah, I think it's pretty much focused. Yeah, you can see, look, what the paint was like. Well, it wasn't what it was like when it was new. We don't know what it was like when it was new, but we can conjecture that it was a lot glossier, or in fact, actually a gloss finish. Maybe, I mean, this is presumably meant to simulate the black slate or black marble or whatever it's called that the French clocks were, which were probably reasonably glossy when they were new. So this is not unreasonable to think the whole case was like this. Of course, I'm interested in what's happened between now and then. I don't, what's the word? Not particularly interested in sort of interpreting that or any kind of conjecture. I'm just here just to lift the thing a bit, clean off a bit of the dirt, whack it together and go home. Right, okay, so just cleaning out the brush. And again, I'm gonna wipe off a bit of this excess moisture so it's not too wet, and then work on this painted paint effect that simulates marbling. Now, on some of the painted dials we've seen, the couple that the pub clock was actually reasonably sort of well consolidated, but often these surfaces can be incredibly friable. So even this with this brush would actually cause a lot of damage. So you have to assess it first. If the paint's all lifting off, then you really have to think about how you're going to glue that paint down, how you're going to stop it from just actually destroying. This doesn't look too bad. It's a little bit wobbly there, but I'm just, again, not going to do masses. Just going to do a bit and lift it with a bit of dabbing. As I say, a paintings conservator may well be shrieking at the sight of me doing this. And if they are, then we'd love to hear from you. You can come on and do a masterclass on painted wooden surfaces cleaning. Right, so I'm going to keep rinsing the brush. And yeah, the little dish of liquid now is getting quite grubby looking, as you can see there. It's sort of got a browny yellowy color. So I think we'd want to change that liquid for some fresh stuff in the not too distant future. So this all, is cool. I think it's a little experiment to see what we can do with some relatively simple and sort of ingredients and things without going crazy. And these are things that you may or may not want to do if you're repairing clocks commercially. It might be that your client wants to send the case to their own people or a specialist conservator or a restorer. Or it may be that you can actually tackle these jobs yourself. I mean, Jeremy is somebody who deals with clocks and their cases and things. So again, Jeremy, what's your sort of view on this? Would you subcontract this work to somebody, or would you again tackle it yourself? Okay, so this is, I'll just zoom out a bit because here under this ledge, the paint's quite clean. Obviously, most of the dust, not all, is sort of falling down with gravity. This has stayed relatively clean, but when we look at this bit here, I don't know if you can see, but again, the vertical surfaces are much, much darker, so either the structure and the chemistry of the paint has changed, or it's amalgamated with that dust, whatever we call it. So I don't know how much we're going to be able to lift out of this. I suppose this is important why good housekeeping, regular dusting is important. But this is, we have to kind of shrug our shoulders maybe and say it's part of the history of the object. I don't know what it's like where you live, but here we're on a main street that runs into a small city. And you can imagine that every one of these houses 120 years ago, whenever it was, when a clock like this would have been new, was burning at least 2 or 3 coal fires, all the factories, then cars with no catalytic converters. In fact, there was a thing, I think, called the Clean Air Act to try and tackle smog. So soot and which looked like fog, basically air pollution as we'd call it today. So a clock like this has seen 120 years of something that we kind of don't experience today, because you look out the window, cars have got catalytic converters. Some of them are electric now. Hardly anybody has the coal fire. Some people have a wood burning stove. It's a different world. And so this dirt that we see, what we call dirt, whatever that is actually part of the history of the object. And you might say, I want to eradicate that. I want to scrub it off, refinish it. Or you might say, actually, let's just remove the surface if we can, and we'll shrug our shoulders and we will live with it. To discuss.
Jeremy and Sam are agreeing with you. Jeremy says smoke from the hearth that was under the clock for years. It was on the mantle. And Sam said maybe you want to smoke to pipe.
Yeah, exactly. What I think one of the, smoking a pipe, wow, and being a clockmaker, there's a thing. I'm sure Sam has I've just actually gotten rid of my pipe. Haven't smoked it for quite a while, so I put it out for free cycling. But it was the Imperious Peterson Church Warden. Anyway, that sadness, that great loss and sadness aside, I think that kind of really sort of sticky, insoluble brown black thing that you get on some clocks that can't be shifted by spirit solvent, doesn't seem to be shifted by water and detergent, sort of like you can sometimes get rid of it with what do they call it, biological washing powder on metal parts. This is really that stuff. It's smoke and soot, tar from the fire, cigarettes. I don't know whether people smoke anymore, but certainly in an area like this, you don't seem to see it so much. But this clock has certainly been through all that. And we're doing well here. Again, we can see that, but just this kind of dabbing, but I'm keeping my eye on any sort of change that I think is detrimental. I'm not noticing any flakes of paint lifting away here. But I think I'm probably going to call it a day in a minute. What I will do is to continue offline and then post on Facebook with some kind of before and after. But I think so. If I will just have a look at the top again in a minute. Now it's had a few minutes to dry out. So again, just dryish brush, brushing out the corners. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Was it Sam that talked about the fire at the hearth?
Jeremy and Sam was the pipe smoker.
Oh, right, okay. That I'm just about to go and do some work in a historic house next week sometime anyway. And everybody always asks, how often do you service a clock, which is a reasonable question to ask. And my answer to that is a little bit sort of avoiding, because it depends is the answer on so many things. Houses, a lot of these historic houses have got gravel drives, and they've got that very fine sort of like continental type path material. I don't know what it is, some crushed up stone outside. And that is like the death for clock mechanisms, because you've got these big empty, big entrance halls, stairways where you've got clocks. And what you've got there is a lot of convection currents. So the dust isn't necessarily coming down from the top, it's actually blowing up underneath. If you've got fires in fireplaces, that's even worse, because that causes this enormous kind of circulating of air, which is why as a basis, if you're going to have a clock on a mantle shelf, then you don't have the fire lit at the same time, but it's kind of like the obvious place for a fire to go. So the answer to how often do you service a clock is you don't. Who knows? Other than what I would say, and it's what a lot of the heritage organizations do, is that you do a regular inspection. So you have an annual or 18-month inspection. You look at the amount of dust, you look at the condition of the lubrication, and so on. So that's kind of what I'm getting back into as lockdown unlocks. So this is as satisfying as this is. And I can see a lot of difference here. The green, presumably when it's new, the green was really bright. There's red in there as well. So really cool colors. but I'm not seeing masses of change now. So I'm going to call it a day on this bit. Just have a look, dry up, and then I'm going to move on to an area where there's some metal work, because as much as I said I'm happy to leave the mounts in place, I'm not massively convinced by my own decision there. So if the mounts need to come off for cleaning, in fact, as again, we're on this kind of shared learning experience, we might just try taking one off and leaving one on and seeing what the difference is. There we go. Okay, so gonna leave that to dry now. Still a bit wet in the corners, but yeah, just looking at the other side, you can see there's quite a big difference. I think you're right, Sam and Jeremy, there's less brown basically, which is probably nicotine, cigarette smoke. You can see there distinctly different colors now. This has still got a way to dry out, but that gilding in there is incredibly subtle, and I'm wondering whether we've actually lost a bit of that in the process of the washing. I mean, this is always a risk where something's water-based, that typically they become insoluble when they're dry, but not always, of course. So that's why we've got to go at it reasonably carefully. It'd be interesting to see what it looks like when it's dry. So on the bottom bit again, yeah, I mean, it's still a little bit wet, but there's quite a lot brighter on this, side. Okay, so let's just have a go at one of these mounts. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So just use exactly the same process. Not hoping, in fact, to see a massive amount of change here, but let's just have a little go at this. Of course, the problem is here, if you get water underneath the mount, the brush is actually, probably looks quite wet on the camera, but it's actually reasonably dry. Then you can't get it out again easily. I'll just work on that area too, as well, as I should say. Yeah, slightly worried about the gilding there, that we're actually losing a bit of that. A bit of cloth, a bit drier. So yeah, I've been thinking about these main springs, so that's what we're going to spend our sort of next half an hour or so thinking about, and actually get on with what people might or might not regard as the interesting bit, the actual workings of the clock. So anyway, you see here a happy couple of hours or something, and this would be washed rather nicely. Now you might want to put some wax on the mounts. I'm not going to wax the case, Tom. I'm just going to leave it exactly as it is. And the reason is that I really like this this kind of degraded, mottled finish that it's got now, this kind of shrunk back finish. And I don't want to kind of gloss that up or fill in any of those cracks. It's not loose, it's not friable. So I'm just happy to leave it as it is. It is, of course, not sealed in any kind of way. So you could consider something that's maybe got like a more matte wax rather than the Renaissance wax that we use. So it doesn't just kind of make it look gloopy and shiny. Sometimes you can use fumed silica to matte things down. Oh gosh, my beautiful brush is starting to fall apart. Another trip to London. Get a new brush. Emergency works out into London. See what the whether we can put that on our tax return. Essential. Was this an essential as expense, Mr. Reed? Yes, it was. Desperate dash up on the train, down on the train. Yeah, ring ahead. Make sure they've got good stock. Right, that's enough faffing there with that. Let's just put our cotton wool. It's a bit of a dry up. So yeah, I'll let that dry and then take some photographs. Just going to, in my hypocritical way, take this mount off and see what it's like underneath. Just so we can consider whether it's best to leave them in place or whether it's best to take them off and wash them more thoroughly. I do remember with these mounts, I think they were gilt, weren't they, from last week? So one of our challenges here. Oh, that's actually quite cool because again, it we can see inside. Let's just zoom in. Let's have a bit of focus, please. There we go. We can see this gilding. Don't know what that gilding method was. I don't think it's all over. So it's maybe lacquer or something. And it might be right into the corners. So it might be electro gilding. Of course, by the time this clock was made, electro gilding was widespread. But what you can see here for the case for removing the mounts is, if I can find a pair of tweezers, in the corner is a good old, pretty disgusting, frankly, bit of fur, sort of dust, hair. I mean, let's not think about that too much. We've got some corrosion around here, which could be something to do with a painted surface, probably not moisture, some green corrosion product. And underneath, we've got the remains of this sort of gilding here. So quite vulnerable. I think having taken this one off and considering they're actually quite easy to get off, sorry, I have to stand up and move that up a little bit, but you probably anyway see the camera now. That maybe there is actually a case for taking these off and washing them separately so we can get inside the mount. It's not a massive job, and also what it will do is you can see here there's quite a lot of gunginess, so let's just have a little go at that as well. Old brush. Wall wound. Maybe I can repair the brush. A bit too wet there. So yeah, maybe there's a case for taking the mounts off. You know, these things. This seems like pretty trivial sort of decisions, but they're just part of those decisions that you're just making the whole time. It's called practice. And one hopes that you're sort of, again, quote unquote, refining your practice, but you know, who knows? But it's only really possible to reflect on the validity or the correctness, if you like, of the decision in retrospect, which is why just been after quite a few weeks off for sort of technical reasons. Oh, I know why it won't focus because I've got it on manual focus. That's better. Blaming the camera. That you only really know in retrospect. And so sometimes you just got to dive in. And I would hardly say this is some kind of reckless maneuver, taking the mount off or leaving it on, but it's representative of a decision-making process. And the older I get, the more I would always err on the side of caution, more cautious. And because it depends where you want to be and what kind of stuff you want to work on, what kind of clients you want, if you want any clients at all. So yeah, kind of quite interesting taking that mount off. Obviously the paint's more worn on the corners, but again, we can see underneath that this area is much less faded. It is much blacker, if that's a thing, and it's quite shiny as well. So again, it gives us a bit of an insight into what the case might have been like when it was newer. But again, you can see there lots of dirt there. So you can keep going at this and going at this and getting the dirt off it, getting the dirt off it. And only you know, with that negotiated position that you thought about at the beginning, this is why it's best not to dive into these things where you're going to say, that's enough, that's my line, as it were. Not what's my line, is it? Is it what's my line? Yeah, which is a different thing altogether. Anyway, so yeah, where your line is, and of course your line, everybody's line, the point at which they say that's enough, I'm stopping, is in a different place. I'll just put this back on now, not because it's finished, but just because it'll save me from getting the screws mixed up. And that line, that extent of practice, we were talking about this earlier, that if you can bear it, it's really useful to think about, you know, the stuff that you're familiar with is great. And hopefully that's what we try and share here to encourage other people to get started and continue in clock repair. But it's really always the stuff that's at the extent of your practice that's maybe just a bit beyond what your comfort zone, as people might call it, that's kind of where it's really interesting, but also that's where it's quite dangerous as well. So it's not the kind of stuff you'd want to necessarily do on a live stream, but it is where one's consideration is a lot, because that's where you have to operate in order to change and continue to change, which is what I'm interested in. Okay, so I think that's enough so-called cleaning. We can see, let's just zoom out. I'm going to get a dry brush, or a drier brush at least. See what we've got in there. Crazy brush department. There's another one. Back up. Stunt double. Double brush. So again, I need to get my vacuum cleaner out, but let's. So now it's started to dry. I mean, I haven't gone crazy on this. You can see that the splodges are still going to be there, which is kind of what I hope for, really. I don't want to eliminate them, but maybe just so I can put my hand on my heart and say, yeah, we've washed this case, which is a slightly unusual thing to say. And you can see here, this area is brighter in the corners. It's less bright. Same thing up there. Distinct difference. You might say it hasn't changed much, but looking at the two, of course, you can see that this side is quite brown and this side is relatively bright. And on the top, so we've got this water mark, which is dried out now. So that is not going to go away. So this is why you always should experiment with a bit that you can't see, because as you can see, I'm committed now to doing the whole thing. It has lifted some of the dust. This side's a bit darker, this side's a bit dustier. But again, here, these splodges are pretty, let's just zoom out and have a look at the difference. Yeah, I mean, not masses of difference is the answer. So some of the kind of ground dust has disappeared, but the splodges seem well cemented. So it'd be interesting to have a closer look at those and see what they are. If you really were a glutton for punishment, you could get a microscope and a scalpel and you could work at those individually, which is probably what they do in a museum, if they decided they wanted to get rid of them or try and sort of limit their visual impact. As it is, obviously, I've already spent quite a lot of time on this. I'm going to do the rest of the case once I've photographed it, and then we're going to call it a day and we will live with it. It's maybe because it's just not dried out yet. Yeah, okay. Let's come back to that when it's dried out a bit. Okay, so it's now time for a very quick 2-minute break, I think. So if I can find my mouse, I can go on to mute. I'll put the movement there so you can be considering springs. I was blaming the camera for not focusing. Oh, no, it isn't focusing either. Come on, there we go. So just going to have a 2-minute comfort break, and then we'll be back at 12 minutes past or something. And We will talk about next steps, a little bit more about the escapement here, the deadbeat escapement, and a little bit about these springs. And I've got some sewing to do, everybody's favorite activity. So let's just go on. Right, welcome back. So the movement here, I'll just find some different gloves, nearly run out. Let's just have a quick chat about this. We did have a look at it last week. The good news is it's in good nick, really happy with the condition. The only thing I can see here, and again, I'll put some pictures on Facebook, is that the escape wheel is damaged, which is actually probably going to be a bit of a problem because it's a deadbeat escapement, which I can't remember who also pointed out last week, but thank you for that. So that's really exciting, actually, that it's maybe a bit unusual, or maybe not. But the escape wheel teeth are damaged, and of course, with this type of escapement, or this type of clock, in fact, if you move this little chap here, I don't know what they call that thing that holds the pallets in place, then the escapement can run through. So I wonder whether that's what's happened, and then somebody's pushed the pallets down and it's caused the problem. So there we go. Put that back on there. So let's just have a look at our, I think we're at maximum amount of zooming in. So let's just get the thing a bit closer so you can see. So I've got this so-called ingenious device, which is to just raise the height of the bench a bit. Because I work on clocks, obviously I don't work on watches or small stuff like that. I have a clock bench, which typically you stand at a clock bench, you're kind of moving around the whole time. However, for things like this, and sometimes if I do have to work on a watch or something, I, that way around, just have this very cheap and cheesy way of lifting the bench up, and it means that the work is closer and easier to see, and hopefully better for you people as well. So let's find a key, winding key, and here we're in very much in case mode and not in movement mode. But let's just put a bit of tension on this spring.
says, does this count as a test stand?
Oh, is this a test stand? Oh, you'll be delighted to know that the test stand for the pub clock and the test stand for the dial clock, which I used for at least 2 minutes last week on Saturday, have both been disassembled, and they've now moved downstairs and they're at the side of the wood burner. So they're ready for winter. So roll on winter. We're going to have roasted chestnuts. What is it that British people do? English people, roasted chestnuts, is it? Yeah. Charles Dickens?
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to read some Dickens and be very English or British or whatever it's called nowadays. Not, by the way, I'm joking. This is a joke. And then warm our hands on the test stands. So good old test stands. They were useful. They're really great for demonstrating to these groups, but hopeless for actually getting the clocks going. The dial clock, by the way, with that new suspension on, was running slow. So I think on Saturday we're going to shorten the spring by about 1/4 inch, but still ticking away on its spring. So let's just have a look at this escapement. Now you can see that this bearing here is quite worn, wobbling about. But as I said last week, this thing is incredibly cleverly designed. Obviously, when a clock escapement wears, the pallets wear a little bit, the acting faces of the pallets, but also the escape wheel wears smaller diameter. So effectively, the center distances move apart. And what they've done here, and I presume it's intentional, is they've put this wheel up here, which is I don't even know how many wheels are in. 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th wheel here, or the upper intermediate wheel, as it's now called under EU law, if we're only still in the EU, which we're not. Sorry. Is rotating in this direction. So it's pushing the pinion down. So as the bearing wears, that kind of compensates for the change in center distance. If that is the case, it's really clever. However, as it rotates, it might be that the arbor gets pushed up. I don't know. We'll have to see when it's actually running. But I think we can probably get away without having to push this, which would make me very happy. However, okay, so deadbeat escapement. What we're interested in here really is safe locking and drop. Looks like there's been a coffee cup there, but it's not actually today. Safe locking and drop. Now, drop on the deadbeat escapement, we've talked a lot about drop on the anchor recoil, and you can kind of glue bits of material back onto the pallet faces to reduce drop, which is a good thing. Very, very different on the deadbeat escapement because, and we can do a diagram, but we're going to run out of time, is that the drop is a function of the thickness of the pallets. And it's really difficult to kind of glue new pieces on. You can cut them away. But what we also want here is safe locking. Now, some of these teeth are fine. Others have got damaged tips. And again, very difficult to do anything with that in terms of getting them back to their effective radius, which might mean that the escape wheel tooth is not landing on the dead face, it's landing on the impulse face. It's not the end of the world. I think this clock's going to be absolutely fine. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, are we going to have to make a new escape wheel or get a new escape wheel? I don't know. So I'll just do a little drawing to demonstrate that. But as you can see, the drops are reasonably even. We've got a bit more internal drop than external drop. And you change internal drop and external drop on a deadbeat escapement by changing the center distance, which we can do quite easily on this escapement. So that's kind of quite good fun. However, what you can't do is to reduce or increase drop in the same way that you can on an anchor recoil escapement. You can just kind of move it around. So I'm going to stroll out to find a bit of paper. Clipboard has wandered off. So deadbeat escapement. So let's just draw. Let's just draw, come on, brain. Here's one escape wheel tooth to start with to get us started. There would be a land on there on the tip. So that's that. And we'll just draw one. I haven't really thought this through, but should have practiced, but that's all right. One pallet. So we've got two pallets, just like we have on the anchor recoil escapement. And there are two things we want here, like on any escapement like this that I can think of anyway. You want to minimize drop, because drop is free angular rotation of the escape wheel without doing anything. So it's lost energy. A little bit of drop is essential for the thing to work. You can't get away with no drop, but just like the anchor recoil escapement, you really want to minimize that. However, this is slightly more tricky with a deadbeat escapement. You see all sorts of ways that people have tried to get around it. What you can't do is start bending this, because this face here is part of the circumference that's generated from the center of the pallets, the pallet arbor axis. That's why this is a dead face. So any attempt at bending that is going to undo the deadness of the escapement. It's not going to be deadbeat anymore. It's either going to have draw, or it's going to have the opposite of draw, impulse, which probably isn't going to kill the thing, but it kind of defeats the object. So what happens is, you see this face here. Let's just draw this face in kind of blue. That's our impulse face. The escapement gets no impulse going in that direction, by the way, from this face here, which is our dead or resting face. So the tooth has to land on the dead face, only just a little bit on there is all you need. And then as the pallets then move in this direction, we get impulse as the tooth slides along this face. We can do more on this, maybe in Open Clock Club, but just to get us going and thinking about this escapement and our clock. So what happens, of course, is that over time, this thing, let's just draw a dotted line, wears like that. Basically, you get a divot. Let's just draw a nice sort of 3D. He calls it 3D, using the term very like that.
Jeremy says the pallet's not already bent up slightly. They don't look
flat. No, they don't. Good question. I've never worked on one of these clocks before. I've worked on American clocks, but I think what Jeremy means is that bit there, look, if you can see it again, yeah, there, is not straight. So that's a question for the audience. Is that meant to be straight when it's new? I suspect not. And I can kind of conjecture why that is, because like the anchor recoil escapement, the pallets have to embrace N.5 teeth. Every tick, every tock is half a tooth of rotation of the escape wheel. And by bending the pallets up like that, you would change, it would be N and not something that isn't a half, which would completely stop the escapement from working. So I think that's probably okay. But if anybody out there knows better, then please let me know. So what you end up with, kind of got a bit confused there between my dotted lines and otherwise, is a groove worn in the pallet face. Okay, so that's not massively problematic. People get incredibly excited about it. Don't polish it out, so-called polish. Don't get rid of that. That doesn't solve the problem. It just makes the whole thing actually worse. You just can't see it anymore. So that is not going to solve your problem here. You can make a new pair of pallets. What people sometimes do is they cut out a slot here with a circular saw and let in a completely new piece of material or a jewel or something. You can do that. That will resolve it. But what this does is, of course, it reduces this value here. The wear reduces that value, and that value, the thickness of the pallet, plus whatever land you've got here, is your drop or not drop, any reduction in that value is an increase in drop. So as the escapement wears, you get more drop, you get less impulse, you get less supplementary arc to the degree that the thing stops. Then what you do, you fit a stronger spring or you start bending things. Now we can get round the issue that the working surface wears back by, on this clock, decreasing the center distance because it's made to be adjustable. I don't know what they call it here, but the little cock or bracket that the pallet is on is riveted to the plate with one rivet. So you can rotate that. So dealing with safe locking is not a problem. Dealing with increased drop is altogether more difficult. If you bend the pallet this way, I'm looking at my camera, then all you're doing is increasing drop here. And if you bend the pallet this way, all you're doing is increasing external drop. You have got X drop in this escapement. You can move it about all you like, internal, external, but you can neither decrease nor increase it unless you change this value here. So all that waffling is one good way of saying one important thing. If you get a clock with a deadbeat escapement, don't so-called polish out the wear, and definitely don't start bending the pallet frame. It's kind of even worse than an anchor recoil escapement. You're gonna get nowhere in terms of improving how the thing works. So what are we going to do here? I've got no idea. We could make a new strip pallet frame out of gauge plate. I think we did that for a Smith's Enfield clock. Or we could go down this road and actually saw out a chunk of the pallet frame and soft solder in there a piece of dead hard steel, which would solve the problem, no problem. And then, of course, in future, you can just come along and put a new insert in it. But you, again, make that decision. We talked before about reversibility. You make that decision and you can't go back, and nobody else can go back either. So anyway, blah, de, blah, blah, as they say, talk too much about that. That's one thing that I noticed. Yeah, if you wiggle that about, and people would say, oh, I was going to use one of my people voices there, but I get told off for that. Quite rightly. That thing needs rebushing, doesn't need rebushing. Let's just see what it's like when we get the thing running. If the pallets are pushing the escape wheel up, then yeah, well, let's put a bush in there. But otherwise, we need to do our depth thing first before bushing. However, so the first thing we're going to do next week is get the movement frame apart for beginners. With any spring-driven clock, the number one thing you must do before taking the movement frame apart is either to take the power off the mainspring, and I put a video on the YouTube channel about this, where you've got a clock with a barrel, what they call a going barrel or fusee. But in this case, we've got something altogether different, because let's just unscrew the belt. We've got something altogether different because the spring is not contained in a barrel, it's open. So if we were to take off these 4 nuts here and take it apart, the whole thing would kind of have a mini explosion. It might hurt us and so on. So we need a way of containing the spring before we take it out. And it's really good place to stop, because we can just dive straight into that next week. All sorts of different positive views about it. Zip ties, clips. Somewhere here I've gotten my, oh, there it is. Bike pedal. I'm old-fashioned, of course, being an old person. So I've still got a bike with pedals on it like this, and these leather straps. And I thought they would be really cool, sort of reversible zip ties that won't slip. We've obviously got zip ties, but also somewhere I've been making my own clamps out of my favorite material, which is Paxolin or paper reinforced. Might need winding in a little bit here. Let's have a look. Still a bit. There we go. So making my own mainspring clamp. And I think this is kind of a good idea, because you can make these out of plywood, which means they'll be nice and grippy. They're light. They don't slip like metal ones. And unfortunately, this is experimental. I got a bit carried away and sawed too much off here. But I've got a new one here, which is nearly done. I offer it up there, just a little bit more somewhere piercing saw work to go around here. And then you can see I've left more material on there. Won't cut it down as much. I think this might work. Might be a little bit dodgy, but you can see it's a really good fit on there. So I'm kind of quite interested in this experiment. But anyway, we're up to time. So that's what we're going to do next week. No more faffing about with cleaning the case with water. We're going to dive straight into clamping these springs. Again, let's do some experiments. There's a Jonas Troyer very kindly made a video about using the zip tie method. Our Dell very kindly pointed us in the direction of the flat clamps, which I don't have, but I think on the Facebook, he said where you can buy them from. So that's really great advice. Somewhere around here, which I've lost, is another clock movement. Yeah, anyway, it was here a bit ago, it's disappeared. Where I've got those kind of round wire clamps on the springs already, which look kind of okay, but totally get the point, they could slip. But I'm kind of quite interested in my Tufnol paper reinforced, resin reinforced paper clamps, because you can see they've got that little bit of compliance, need to be chunky around here. I don't think they'll break, but just to give them a bit more strength. But they grip. That's a good thing about this. It's not slippy. Anyway, that's it for now. As always, thank you very much for following along. Thanks for everybody in the Facebook group. It was really great today to get to 1,000 members. Super special thanks to Team Open Clock Club here in the corner who've been keeping everybody entertained with the live chat. This video will go up on YouTube if it's recording. Who knows, because I can't even see that, but presume it is. If we don't see you on Facebook before, we will see you on Saturday. I've slightly forgotten what we're doing because we've finished the Fusey clock. We'll see you on Saturday at 1800 British summertime for Open Clock Club number 42. You need to sign up for that on Eventbrite, but there are links all over the place. Google it. And we're going to be starting with our top 22 or 23 things that stop a clock, i.e. fault finding, which is really useful information for beginners. So take care. Thanks for your support, and we will see you very soon. Bye for now.